ago for the podcast, so let's not worry about that. I'm going to introduce my guest right now, Beth Moore again. She's running for State House seat, Georgia House, and the incumbent is Scott Hilton. So thank you for joining me, Beth, tonight.
Thank you, Rico. I'm so happy to be here because I am a fan of the podcast. I listen every week that you do this. I've listened to you interview Veronica Cope, Mike Mason, Steve Riley, Brian, the city manager. So you're doing a great job. Thank you.
Well, thanks. I appreciate it. Today I don't feel like I'm doing that good of a job, but Facebook Live, it's what works, right? So we got quite a few people watching, it seems. A good few people. And I want to, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Okay, sure. Yeah. So, I am running for House District 95 to represent Peachtree Corners, Norcross, Berkeley, Lake, Duluth, and Johns Creek in the Georgia House of Representatives. Okay. I grew up in this area. This is my home. In fact, my mom still lives in the house that I grew up in Dunwoody North, about 2 miles outside of the district. But I spent most of my childhood running around Peachtree Corners because I went to school at Wesleyan, which is where a lot of students around this area go to school. Yeah. Had a great time there. So this is really where I lived out my childhood dreams along the banks of the Chattahoochee. And now my husband and I own a home in Lockridge Forest, which is right off of Winters Chapel. Mm-hmm. We absolutely love it, and we're going to stay here as long as we possibly can. We love living out here.
Cool. And your background is you graduated from Wesleyan in 2000. You attended Woodward Academy. Mm-hmm. Went to UGA. You were the class of 2004. You were a psych major and a German dual major. Mm-hmm. Right? Just like my daughter, actually.
Yeah. Yeah. So people find it interesting. I actually went to Woodward Academy for 2 years, so I still have a lot of friends from those 2 years when I was down there. But if you know where Woodward is, it's way down in College Park, down by the airport. And living in Dunwoody, it was kind of a challenge. So when I found out there was this other school up here called Wesleyan, I asked my parents if I could transfer. So I spent the last 2 years of high school at Wesleyan. And then from there went on to the University of Georgia on the Hope Scholarship. And dual majored in German and psychology. And probably the highlight of my college career was spending my entire junior year of college as a German exchange student at the University of Heidelberg.
Really?
So while in Germany at a German university, I was taking psychology classes in German.
And you know what? That's the place to do it. Actually, that makes sense to me.
Yes.
Cool. And then you went to GSU Law, right?
I did. I was one of those students that worked for a couple of years before I decided to go to law school. Mm-hmm. In fact, I thought that I was going to go to medical school. So my first job out of college was at the Emory School of Medicine, doing biological research over there in conjunction with the Yerkes Primate Center. So while I was there, I got permission to take pre-med classes, as part of, one of the benefits of my employment there. Right. And I enjoyed it, but I found out really quickly that my brain is just not equipped to work in the medical field. God bless the people who do that type of work. It takes a very special person to do that.
Yeah, it does.
Yeah, so realized that wasn't for me. I had a roommate at the time who had just graduated from law school, and he was, I'd never really considered that. So I started poking around at some of the law school entrance exams, and I was like, wow, I think I can do this. So so I took the test, started working as a paralegal at a big firm downtown, so I could kind of get a sense of what the career would entail.
Smart. Okay.
Yeah. Did that for 2 years and got into Georgia State Law. And when I was at Georgia State Law, it was ranked the #1 most valuable law school in the country at the time because of its amazing academic program, but also because of its relatively low tuition, its proximity to the state capitol, to the big law firms, its diversity in terms of race and age. So I had an absolutely wonderful experience while I was there.
Cool. And you actually ended up opening your own law firm, no? At one point?
I did. I went to law school for the sole purpose of becoming an entertainment attorney.
So you had that fixed in your mind. That's what you wanted to do?
Day one, absolutely, yes.
Why?
Because I have the heart of an artist, but none of the talent. So, I knew that
I feel the same way.
Yeah, aside from family and friends, art and music were, really the only things in life that I really cared about, at the time. And, that's just really what drove my passions in life. And because I don't have the talent to be an artist myself, I thought, well, what's the next hardest thing that I can do? And I thought, I know, I'm going to go to law school and I will be a lawyer for artists.
Okay.
Right?
And they need that too, right?
Absolutely, absolutely they do. And I've since discovered that there really are not a lot of people that do this type of work.
Yeah.
I was the only person from my class, from my law school class, that does entertainment law. There are maybe one or two others within my surrounding classes that I can point to that do this type of work, but it's actually pretty rare, which is good for me because I get a lot of business because there's not a lot of competition.
I was going to say, it's a very niche place to be.
Yes.
So that's always good when you're doing that, right?
Yes, absolutely. And when I was at Georgia State Law, I focused my my leadership skills in two areas. Number one was with I ran the Sports and Entertainment Law Society, which I'm proud to say was one of the largest, most robust student organizations within the law school at the time. I also started a new student group while I was there. At the time it was called the Be Your Own Boss Network, and it was an organization designed to teach and encourage law students to someday start their own practice.
Okay.
Because while you're down there, there is a big emphasis on lawyers, continuing their education to actually be a practicing attorney with other firms. The idea is you go from law school, you learn the academics,
right,
and then go to work for a big firm, and they teach you how to actually be a lawyer.
And then you be a lawyer with them for the rest of your
yes.
life or something.
Right.
Maybe become a partner at some point.
Yeah. So there's no job fair for solo practitioners. So we kind of created this atmosphere, letting people know, like, it is possible when you leave here that you can work your way into a position where you can be self-employed.
Yeah, it's interesting. I have a couple of friends that are lawyers, and that almost all of them actually either worked for a judge or worked for a law firm. Mm-hmm. None of them thought they could do it on their own.
Yeah.
But like anything else, I think if you're motivated that way, you can.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So you have a great background, certainly close into Peachtree Corners as far as growing up here and school here and living here. Why do you want to run?
Yeah, so I can give you several answers. I'll try to give you a couple.
Mm-hmm.
I think 2016 was a wake-up call for a lot of people. That we live in a citizen democracy, but we don't have enough citizens participating in that part of the democracy. Mm-hmm. One statistic I learned from running is that 82% of House seats go unopposed every year. And
sure,
that's true for both parties.
Yeah.
There are plenty of Democrats and Republicans who live in safe districts and
mm-hmm.
don't get primaried and don't get challenged.
Yeah.
That's a problem. Democracy is all about choice.
Mm-hmm.
But if you do not have a choice on the ballot, what good is it, right?
Okay.
So there's that. But also, I'm taking a look around at our state, the state I love,
mm-hmm.
my native home. We have the 8th largest population in the country, mm-hmm. and we have the 5th highest uninsured population in the country. Georgia does a lot of things right, but it does a lot of things wrong. And not fixing the uninsured problem, I think, is one of the worst trends that we have set for ourselves over the past few decades. And to me, that is a moral issue. Mm-hmm. It is an economic issue, and it's something that I feel very passionately about. Your health is everything. You could have $1 billion in the bank, but if you're sick, mm-hmm. you're dying, that money doesn't mean a thing.
How would you take care of that? How would you pay for that? How would, it's good to have that passion to want to take care of things like that. And I feel the same way. But how would you take care of paying for that bill? Because there is a bill at some point someone has to pay for it.
Sure. Well, first I'll say this. It's funny that when we talk about necessities like healthcare, education, and transportation, the issue of cost always comes up. But when we're talking about building a border wall or going to war or doing, all of these other things that, certain people want, the issue of cost never comes up. It's a matter of priorities, right?
Isn't that funny though? It never comes up, but yet that wall is not being built yet. Because someone, even the Republicans, even my fellow Republicans, understand someone has to pay for that. And they're not willing to pay for that bill yet, it seems, because that's not.
Well, I thought Mexico was going to pay for it.
Yeah, yeah. There you go. I can't believe everything you hear on the internet.
Well, we can talk about healthcare in particular, because there are ways that we can expand access to affordable healthcare, and rebalance the budget, to make that possible. And here's what I foresee. I mean, we've tried the old way of doing nothing, and that's not working. So here's an idea. Let's try something new. All right. With the Medicaid expansion, this is something that Democrats across the board are in favor of. There are a couple reasonable Republicans who realize that this could actually be a good thing for our state, and it's the right thing to do as well. Had we opted into the Medicaid expansion when the Affordable Care Act originally passed, we would have paid $0. Right? It was on a graded scale, though, so that over time the states would start to pick up more and more of the tab, but the federal government would still pay for 90% of it. That is our tax dollars. Georgians pay federal taxes. Those taxes can come back to our state, to be spent in our state, to pay for jobs in our state. And our current leadership has said, no thanks, we don't need all of those billions of dollars. For us to cover 10% of the cost and to have 90% of our tax dollars, coming back into our state, that just makes good economic sense to me. And we can reprioritize our budget to cover that cost. And here's what I also foresee, is that, the healthier population that we have, the more people we can have working, the greater the tax base that we'll have. So, I see the big picture, of having a healthier workforce, having downstream positive effects of being able to generate more tax revenue because we have more people working, because we have a healthier workforce.
Yeah, it's interesting, and you're right. I mean, I think that if Georgia, was it John Cusack? What's his name? The governor from, that ran for president.
Kasich.
Kasich, that was it. I think he accepted it in his state. And he's a Republican. The reason he did that was for that same reason. The money was there. It made sense to do it. Now, some Republicans want to be philosophically real to their constituents, I guess. And they feel that that shouldn't have happened to begin with, so they didn't want to take it. So.
That's right. Yeah. So that's probably one of the barriers happening here in Georgia, is that to expand Medicaid would be an acknowledgement that the Affordable Care Act is in fact the law of the land.
Yeah, after all these years. Now it's either going to implode because it's being made to implode, or it's going to implode because of its own weight. I mean, there's things wrong with it, obviously. There's plenty of things wrong with it and plenty of things good with it. But like Obama had said at one point, and I remember this clearly, he said, once people have had it for a few years, they'll understand the importance of it. Now, some people said, well, that's the point. You're giving it, and then it becomes an entitlement, right? People think that you deserve it then at that point. But there's a lot of good that came out of it. And if it was handled better, probably would have been even better here in Georgia. But
I think the Affordable Care Act was the best option that we had to work within the system that we have, which is a system that is run by private health insurance, right? I mean, on the far other end of the scale, you have advocates who would rather do away with that system altogether and put everybody on, this similar single payer system that, basically every other developed country on earth has. Okay, America is special. We have a different system going on. It just happens to be a system that other countries look to as an example of how not to structure your healthcare system.
Yeah.
Right? So unless we wanted to completely get rid of our current existing system, then instead we're going to have to tinker with the system we have. And to me, that was what the Affordable Care Act ultimately sought to do. But that still required buy-in from the states, right? So that the states had an obligation at that point to fulfill the promise of the Affordable Care Act by expanding Medicaid. That was the part of the program that would have covered people who work, who make too much money to qualify for traditional Medicaid, which is usually reserved for, the sick, the disabled, children, right? But also people who make too little to qualify for the subsidies to help them be able to afford those premiums.
Now, how do you think the state should handle that? If you become a state rep as a Democrat, and which is a very difficult thing in this district, quite frankly.
I disagree, but we'll get to that later.
Okay. Good. It's good to have a healthy disagreement. It's, I've been in politics so long that sometimes I look at the numbers, and the numbers don't lie, and sometimes it is difficult. But, especially in an off-year election, but there's a lot of women candidates running. There's a lot of energy and momentum. Now, in other states for sure, and I don't know if that can be replicated here in Georgia. You do have Stacey Abrams running for governor, first African American to actually be nominated, I think, to run for governor, or that might have a chance to win the governorship. That can, if she has coattails, help the rest of the candidates along the way. But how would you, as a Democratic, representative, work that in the state capitol? What can you do at this point with healthcare?
Yeah, so having Stacey Abrams in the governor's mansion is definitely going to help with this, absolutely. But it is the purview of the state legislature to put forth the legislation to expand Medicaid, right? So that is absolutely the first step. Bills like that you typically start in the House, move on to the Senate. You got both chambers agreeing to the expansion bill, then it goes to the governor's desk.
But you have a majority Republican that's, no matter how many Democrats I think can possibly win this time around, the Democrats will still be a minority. How would you work that?
Well, first, because this issue is so important, it's something that I will advocate for, regardless of what the party lines are. Because, trust me, healthcare is an issue that crosses party lines. There are Republicans out there who would benefit from the Medicaid expansion, right? So this is an issue we're going to have to keep talking about and keep enrolling people. There are plenty of people, Democrats and Republicans, who are feeling the pinch even when they have insurance, right? The health insurance problem crosses age, crosses race, crosses political affiliations. And Georgia has simply not done anything within its power to regulate this. We can't rely on the insurance commissioner to keep the insurance companies in check. We can't rely on the Georgia legislature to make any significant progress on this issue. And that is why you see so many new candidates running. We've gotten to the breaking point, and women in particular, who are, for the most part, running as Democrats, are the ones who see this and are concerned about it. Every single female candidate running as a Democrat that I've met has healthcare as part of their top platform, and this is why. Maybe it's because we suffer from empathy, and we see it happening. Maybe it's happening in our neighborhoods, in our homes, for ourselves. It's easy to be against healthcare because the people who are most for it are dead or dying.
Yes, for sure that, but I think people need to also understand that healthcare is something that is almost with all the contagions going on. So there's been recalls. The CDC puts out a recall every week. They put out all these outbreaks that are going on with listeria, salmonella. People have to go to the hospital, maybe emergency room, to their doctor. If they're part of an outbreak that happened, and they have no insurance, they're less likely to go to the doctor. So for me, my thought, especially in the environment we're in, where people are so against immigrants and illegal immigrants, that if you don't provide that medical coverage to them in a world where there's so many outbreaks of different things going on, that those people will suffer. Not only those people will suffer, but I think the children will suffer, as well as kids in the schools that they're in schools with. your neighbors, your business colleagues that would be affected by that as well.
And we don't even have to wait for an outbreak for that scenario to play out. It's happening right now. Somebody who may have developed diabetes, but cannot go and get the preventative care to prevent further suffering, may end up, becoming, may end up having an even worse health outcome that may take them from somebody who we can treat and prevent from having, a bad health spell, to, on the other end of the spectrum, somebody who is now, so crippled from their disease that they now have to go on Social Security disability.
Right. So it's going to cost more if you're going to look at that.
Exactly. It's going to cost taxpayers more,
right.
If we don't try to solve this problem on the front end. If, using a medical analogy, we are treating the symptoms instead of the cause.
Yes, it seems to be. So going from that, which is a big Democratic issue, to another Democratic issue, which is college education and funding of college education. Where are you on that? In fact, the question that was put by one of our fans at one point was that Stacey Abrams supports hope for he mentioned for illegal immigrants, but really what it is for DACA members of DACA that were illegal, that are registered, that are here. They're usually children that have been here since they were young kids. How do you feel about the Hope Scholarship being used in that way to help these kids?
Yeah, so that's a packed question, so let's unpack it.
Sure.
So first of all, hi Luke, let's go get some coffee. When I was going to UGA, I went during a time when the Hope Scholarship funded my full education, my full tuition. I think we even got a little extra money for books, right? My parents had 4 kids, and we all qualified for full tuition coverage under the Hope Scholarship. The Hope Scholarship saved my family probably $200,000 or more if you consider the fact that we didn't have to take out loans and pay interest for 30 years, right? So that is a middle class benefit that my family directly received from the state. And look at the benefits of that. I went to a great school. Georgia became one of the most competitive universities to get into. I stayed here in the state. I built my career here, bought my home here. Georgia has been very good to me, which is another reason why I decided to run. Because this state has given me so much. And it's only right that, each of us who have benefited, for example, under the Hope Scholarship, that we do what we can to give back, right? The other thing that the questioner mentioned is, illegal aliens, quote unquote. I have issue with this term because, it creates a sense of the other, that these people who, were not born here are different from us, are so fundamentally different, we call them aliens. And I get alien is actually, to some degree, a legal term of art. But you slap illegal in front of it, and the intention, the psychological intention, is for you to view these people as something other than God's children. These are human beings, first and foremost. Yeah, they might speak a different language, they might have a different skin tone, but they're people. They're human beings. And, I don't wear my religion on my sleeve, but at Wesleyan, we were taught to love our neighbors as ourselves. Okay, so that is my guiding light. Okay, but when you look at, what was happening even before some of the changes in the law were made, was that you have these children who have only ever known the United States as their home. They are Americans in every sense of the word, except on paper. We have invested in these children, right? We have spent thousands upon thousands of dollars, millions across the board to educate them, And what are we going to do? We're just going to ship them off to another country and get rid of these valuable resources? No.
Yeah, that doesn't make sense, right? and I think of course, the numbers vary with the amount of illegal immigrants that are not documented. Let's call them not documented immigrants.
Undocumented, yeah.
They used to call Italians a different word for that, by the way, when Italians came here.
And the Irish.
And the Irish
Chinese,
and the Germans.
and Japanese,
right.
and
Absolutely.
Germans. Yep.
So we're all different at different times of that migration to this great country. My parents came here from Italy. and they came here legally, but they had to go through a lot to be able to get here. And before them, my great grandfather came here even before that, and then went back to Italy because he didn't like the.
I am somebody's great anchor baby.
See, there you go. So we're all from immigrants, and I know some people say, well, they're illegal. They're leaving places that are not good for them, dangerous places for their kids. So the DACAs are, I think, only amount to about 800,000 kids under 21 or something. Would you provide? Do you think Hope Scholarship makes sense then to provide to them? They've gone through elementary school, middle school, high school. They want to be productive members of society. They don't know any other country that people think they should go back to.
Yeah.
Do you think they should get education? Do you think they should get that Hope Scholarship?
Absolutely, we should educate them, and we should want them to stay here and be a part of the fabric of our society. I would, of course, like to see, federal legislation to put in place a formal process so that these people don't have to walk around in fear of being deported.
Yes.
Right? Yes,
yeah.
we definitely support that.
Okay.
But federal immigration enforcement, that is the purview of the federal government. Sure, there are programs in place for state and county police officers to double as federal ICE agents. I get that, but these people are here.
Yeah.
They're in our backyards, and they're we're going to have criminal people of all colors and all nationalities. Okay, Americans are criminals too, but these people are already here. If the problem is that they don't have paperwork, well, let's solve that problem.
Right, right. That makes sense to me. Yes, solve that problem. Give them the right paperwork. This way they can pay legal income tax.
Yeah.
They're paying sales tax probably, but they should be paying income tax also.
And they want to as well.
I'm sure, and they want to buy a house.
Exactly.
I mean, there's certain things that happen. I mean, when some of this was going on originally, there were people leaving Georgia that were immigrants. And the construction industry was for want of laborers because of that.
Yeah.
Doesn't make sense now.
The farm industry in
Yes.
Georgia was suffering.
Right.
You had
Peanut farmers.
Peaches and
Yes.
peanuts not
So
getting picked.
everyone winks at, we don't want them here, but then we want them here because we don't have to pay them regular minimum wage. We pay them whatever we want to pay them, and that's the sad part of it. People just don't want to admit certain things. There is an underground economy.
Yeah.
And
And we're paying more at the grocery store because of our actions, to deny these people the ability to work here.
yeah, well, and we'll be paying more when those tariffs keep coming.
Yep.
So we won't get to that right now. But transportation, so the Gwinnett County Commission adopted a transit plan July 17th that recommends a heavy rail line that would connect Duraville Water Station to as far as Gwinnett Place Mall. There's going to be a special election. We'll be paying lots of money for that special election, but there'll be a special election just for that one item on the city ballot to whether we should, I think whether we accept the MARTA funds and do whatever we want to do with it. So it's a little bit more complicated. I'll have someone on the show about that. But how do you feel about that transit plan coming into Gwinnett County?
Yeah. So I do support the expansion of public transit for a whole host of reasons. I think anybody who's lived in Atlanta long enough knows that, the traffic here is just ridiculous. When I was growing up, rush hour was between 5 and 6, right? And then it was 5 to 7. Now it's 4 to 7. I swear it's 3 to 7 now. And it's not just 5 days a week, it's 7 days a week. I mean, this is unsustainable.
Yeah.
Thank goodness I work from home most days because I don't have to suffer through that. But
Right.
that is by design. Atlanta has one of the longest commutes in the country. Our MARTA, for as good as it is, for where it is right now, is not nearly enough. And it's an economic issue. People out in, Lawrenceville need to be able to access certain services downtown, whether it's going to the courthouse, going to universities, going to the airport. We have effectively blocked certain people from accessing services because there's just no way to get there.
Do you think that it should be more like, New York City's big, so it's like you have the subway system. So it's every other block practically it stops at. But then you had the Long Island Railroad that had certain stops through cities. The same with the rail that goes, the commercial rail that goes from Duluth, Norcross, Duluth, the old rail system that CRX I think uses, that goes from like Atlanta into Norcross, Duluth, Suwanee, Sugar Hill, that rail system. Should we have something like that through Gwinnett County that people can go to and then just take the train right into Atlanta?
If you can convince the train companies to let us use the right of ways, then sure. But they're not gonna.
No,
they're not gonna let us use.
So
those
we're gonna
routes.
have to build a whole new heavy rail system.
Yeah.
Or light rail.
Yeah, I mean, well, it's a combination. See, when people think, hear the term public transit or mass transit,
Mm-hmm.
they think MARTA, and that's part of the equation. It's certainly not the only part.
Mm-hmm.
Atlanta has built a kind of a test track for light rail. And from what I understand from political insiders was that the streetcar in downtown Atlanta was actually designed to be a proof of concept, to get other people around Atlanta used to the idea, to see that, oh, this is what light rail means, this is how it works, this is what every major European city across Europe uses. So if that makes more sense, then absolutely. Heavy rail is expensive. I won't deny that. But here's an interesting anecdote. There was an article that came out maybe just a year or two ago, written by the president of Oglethorpe University, who one summer he decided to moonlight as an Uber driver because he wanted to see what life was like for his students, many of whom, make income by driving Uber or Lyft. So obviously the president of a university doesn't need to do this for economic reasons. He did it as an experiment. And the article that he wrote identified the one place where the majority of his riders were going. Enrico, you want to guess where that place was that most people were going?
No, where?
MARTA. Yes,
That
MARTA.
makes sense, sure.
Sure, because MARTA is
The last mile.
Exactly, yes. So Uber was providing the last mile from the main arteries that MARTA provides. It doesn't go everywhere we need it to go, but for where it does go, people can, kind of structure their lives around it. Certainly, just about every time I go to the airport, I make use of, I drive into DeKalb County, I park at the MARTA station, and we take MARTA down, or we take Uber to MARTA. So we don't have to pay, whatever it is, $20, $30 a day to park down at the airport.
Yeah, my son actually commutes to Georgia State University.
That's right.
He drives to MARTA and he takes the train because it's too expensive to go park down there.
He's doing the same thing I did during my 3 years of law school going to Georgia
Really?
State. I was living out here in Peachtree Corners. I would drive down to Doraville, and I would take the train into Georgia State. I would not have survived 3 years, nor would I have been able to afford 3 years of parking passes had MARTA not enabled me to access to university downtown.
And you know what? And it's a great system to be able to get down there and stuff. Now, there's issues around that campus maybe, but it's a whole different story.
I had a great time while I was there. In fact, they refurbished the entire law school 2 years after I left.
Because Beth left, they had to do it.
I was in the old dungeon. Now they have a beautiful campus.
Yeah, it is actually expanded, but
Yes.
yeah. So, so transportation's an issue. Education. We talked about a little bit about healthcare. There's so many different pieces of legislation that comes out of the House that can come out of the House and actually run 2 years before they even get approved, it seems. Is there any particular legislation that you'd like to see passed that is in the House that has not gotten to that point?
Well, I would come back to the Medicaid expansion bill. There are Democrats in the House who have made that a focal point for them. So, I would wholly support that. I would like to explore more economic development, possibilities. I know that Amazon is a big topic right now. Yeah, okay, everybody wants these big Amazon jobs.
Right.
It'd be great if we got them, but I think that there are things that we can do to build 50,000 jobs for small businesses all over the state, as opposed to the 50,000 that would be concentrated in Atlanta under this one corporate roof. And actually that comes back to the healthcare issue. You know, I don't know about you, Rico, but I have lots and lots of friends and colleagues who have all told me the same story, which is that they wish they could leave their job to go start a business, start a law practice, you know, whatever it is, but they can't afford to leave their health benefits.
That's a big thing. That's true.
Imagine how many jobs have not been created in Georgia because we have not solved the individual health insurance problem, which, by the way, is a pretty unique problem to Georgia. You know, there are 32 other states, including the District of Columbia, which have chosen to address this problem by expanding Medicaid, by creating these state-based health insurance exchanges, which is based on the Romney Care model that they put in place up in Massachusetts, where they only have 2% uninsured.
Right. To be fair, Romney disowned that one. So.
Well, it was originally a Republican idea. Yeah, including the individual mandate.
Yes.
You know, because the idea being that we are all human, we are all mortal, we will all at some point in our lives need health insurance.
Yeah, and I don't understand the people that are against that individual mandate, because
the whole idea was personal responsibility.
Correct. And you have to, if you're on the road, you need to pay car insurance. I can't drive a car without car insurance. You're forcing me to pay car insurance. I have a home with a mortgage. I have to have home insurance. There's certain insurances where you have to have that insurance. So why not do the mandate? That's what I don't understand. People saying no.
Yeah.
That's not right.
So instead, now the president has gotten rid of the individual mandate. Well, not just the president, the whole Congress has gotten rid of the individual mandate, which means that anybody can just choose to not carry insurance. But the moment they have a health issue, they'll show up in the emergency room.
That's right.
And you and me, Rico, as taxpayers, and Luke, all you guys listening, we're all going to pay for their bills.
That's right. Absolutely. I was with some time ago, it was Gwinnett Medical, I think. It was a board of some advisors, informal advisors, and they were talking about how the emergency room, this was over a decade ago, and even back then, how the emergency room was being used as a general practitioner visit place, because there were people that couldn't afford insurance back then, and they were using the ER for that reason. Who pays for that? And you can't turn them away. They have to be treated.
Yeah.
So we all pay for that. So let's do it the right way, maybe, to make sense to me.
That's right. Yeah. I mean, there's also this idea that I've come across in certain circles where, you know, people think that when we talk about, you know, making healthcare affordable and expanding Medicaid, that we're talking about free healthcare. Let me get something straight with all y'all. It's not free. People have to pay for it.
Right.
But the problem is it's too expensive for people to be able to afford it. Now,
and someone has to pay for it.
Yeah. Well, I was talking to someone just last night talking about how she pays $2,000 a month for a policy for a family of 4. She pays $24,000 a year to have health insurance, not for health services, health insurance.
And what's the deductible on that?
$8,000 deductible. And I guarantee if she has a health emergency, like she has to go through cancer treatment, chemo, hip replacement, she's still going to pay even beyond that. It happened to an aunt of mine, God bless her, but she had had to go through a big, health surgery, health-related surgery, and still ended up, she had insurance, she thought she had a good plan, she knew she had a high deductible, went through a hip replacement, and still got stuck with a $100,000 bill.
Yeah.
Because that's the part of the process, that procedure that her health insurance didn't cover. That's unsustainable.
Right.
Medical bankruptcy is a uniquely American term. This does not happen in other countries. Why is the United States so behind the times that we can't figure out a problem that every other developed country on earth, including all of Europe, Canada, even South Korea, has figured out that they can put in place universal health care system?
I'll tell you, there are some Republicans that would like to see a catastrophic insurance in place, I think. And that would cover that type of thing. But they would rather see that in place than a general health plan in place, because they see that as a safety net, maybe for older people or people that really need. But you're going to pay a certain amount of money into that, and the triggers to make that catastrophic insurance take place, it's going to be well beyond what normal people be able to do anyway. So
yeah. You know what the most popular program that the federal government runs right now is? It's Medicare.
Oh yeah,
right?
well, it's the biggest part of the budget.
Even the most conservative members of my family were so happy when they turned 65 and could finally qualify for Medicare. You know, it's like, you know, why, you know, but
Yeah.
people, you know, of your age, my age,
Mhm.
we are the ones that are helping to pay for and subsidize those costs for Medicare.
Yeah.
But we don't get the same benefits.
No.
We don't get guaranteed health coverage.
And you know what? Probably, you know, probably if you just, it's like Social Security, right? You stop paying into Social Security at a certain level of income.
Mhm.
Why? I mean, all we have to do is trigger that up another $10,000, and that probably would clear all the debt that we're accumulating on that.
Yeah.
It's just moving some, and you know what? If you're making $100,000 and you're paying Social Security or into it up to a certain point, instead paid up to $120,000. Those might not be quite the numbers, but my point is, why do we stop it there, and why don't we let it ride up a little bit, and that would take care of some of that cost?
Why? Because of politics.
Right. Well, of course.
Right?
You
Yeah.
know.
And you know, and as more and more wealth gets concentrated into fewer
Yes,
hands,
absolutely.
more of that money becomes inaccessible, you know, to become part of the Social Security network.
God forbid, right? Because when you get to a certain level of income, you're not getting a paycheck. You're getting distribution. You're getting capital distribution. Way different, tax way different, and you don't even get taxed for Social Security on that. So if you're making over $200,000, you're probably getting other types of distribution that's not able to be taxed there.
Yeah.
We just need to change that a little bit. It's like that Republican tax cut that we received, that businesses get the permanent tax cut, and the individual sunsets after 10 years.
Mm.
I mean, what's the point of that?
Well, that is a federal issue, so I'll let
Yes.
you talk to Carolyn Bordeaux about that.
We have, well, Luke, a little late, Luke Crawford, one of our listeners, Scott Helton, thanks for watching.
Hey,
A
Scott.
few other people have joined us. Luke, we've already asked that question about Stacey Abrams and the Hope Scholarship with the DACA, so rewind and you can watch that later. But let's move on a little bit. I thank you for everyone joining us that keeps coming on. And what about the film industry? That's big for me. I love the film industry. I was an extra in a couple of movies and TV shows. You'd never see me though. It was blurred background extra. But it was fun to be on the set. And it's fun to see that Walking Dead, even though Rick Grimes' character is leaving. Andrew
Spoiler
Lincoln.
alert, huh?
Yes, Andrew Lincoln is leaving after the next season, I guess. But the industry is thriving here in Atlanta. It's unbelievable. In Georgia, although really in the metro area, it seems. Although some other counties are getting some play on that.
It is a statewide phenomenon.
Yeah.
It really is. You know, I think it's one of the best decisions that Georgia has made, which is to experiment with venturing into the film tax credit. You know, it's brought, you know, billions of tax revenues into our state. I think 2017 was $9.5 billion into our state.
Right.
Has created thousands of jobs, helped support thousands of jobs. And mine included. You know,
Yeah.
I have my concentration is mostly in music, but I do have clients who work in film and television. So it's been great. And you know, the way that I've seen it is that the film and television industry, which is, you know, that operates under the same tax credit really, has created this kind of you know, wave effect where it's really just driving all kinds of talent
Yeah.
into the city. You know, whether that's musical talent, theatrical talent, direction, camera, lighting, post-production,
electricians,
absolutely set
catering.
design,
Yeah.
yeah, all of that.
I'm almost afraid that some politicians would want to get rid of the incentive because sometimes these incentives don't work. They don't give back what they say they give back. But this, I think, without a doubt, I don't think you have to be a mathematician to figure out that this particular incentive has really grown, has helped the state and brought lots of money into the state.
Yeah, I mean, I think recent accounts would say that Georgia is now the #1 place for film. And so we have, you know, to some degree surpassed Los Angeles, New York,
Really?
Toronto,
Toronto,
yeah.
yes. New York, yes.
North Carolina used to be a competitor, but
They
they got rid of their tax credit.
And everyone
Yes.
left and came south.
That's right. That's right. Yeah. You know, it's a beautiful state. We have a wide variety of places where you can film, from the North Georgia mountains to the Piedmont region. You got the metropolitan areas around Atlanta. You got the coastal areas. You got the swampland down in the south. So
the Okefenokee.
yeah, just about any type of backdrop you'd want for a film, we've got it here. Yeah.
So we're close to the end of the hour.
Oh no, that went by so fast.
I know, right? We got another 10 minutes.
Okay.
But I want to be able to get to a few other things as well. So the industry, the film industry, fine. Education, healthcare, transportation, those are all hot button issues. Economic development, startups. I mean, we have, in Peachtree Corners, we have an incubator, Prototype Prime. We also have an accelerator, I think it's called ATK. It's Atlanta Tech Park. So we're in Prototype Prime, actually where we do some of our podcasts during the noon hour, once or twice a month, actually has about 15 startups at that location. Do you see anything that the Georgia legislators should be doing to to promote startups the same way maybe we're doing for the film industry? Maybe there's something that we can do there.
Well, I'm going to bring it right on back to what we've talked about before.
Okay.
Healthcare.
Okay.
Right. I think that healthcare absolutely, if we fix this problem, it will be a huge economic driver. That people will be able to venture out of their corporate jobs, and go take a risk on a new startup. But think about a would-be entrepreneur that has maybe a spouse, maybe a couple kids. Yeah. It would be irresponsible of that person to get rid of something as important as their health benefits. So I can understand why a lot of people don't do it. They'll stick around their corporate job simply because they can't afford to spend $24,000 a year simply on health insurance.
It's expensive, even if it's not $24,000. I mean, certainly the insurance runs about $1,200 to $1,600 a month for a family, easy enough, without any. So you're still looking at, you're still looking at.
And I tie this into the entertainment industry as well, because what a lot of people don't realize about music, film, and television is that this is not an employer-based industry.
No.
You can't go downtown and get a job at the music factory, okay? It is an industry that is comprised of a patchwork of independent contractors, entrepreneurs, small businesses, right? If, for example, somebody may go and work on a film as the camera person for 3 months, 6 months, when once filming has wrapped, they're suddenly unemployed and they got to go find their next gig. Yeah. They might get their next gig, the next week, or it might take them 3 months before they get picked up for a new project. So I love that we have all of these new jobs coming here. It's exciting, especially for my generation, the millennial generation. But it does, it is a cross-generational industry. But it's scary for a lot of people out there. Yeah. They don't know necessarily, when they're going to get their next paycheck. They're working hard. They're working the gig economy, just like every millennial, working 4 or 5 jobs just to stay alive. But none of them come with benefits. Right. So I really do think that addressing the health insurance, problem here in Georgia, again, it's a moral issue, but it is also an economic issue.
We. I want to say thank you to Scott. Scott Hilton says hi, by the way.
Hey.
He's enjoying the engagement and the conversation here. Thanks, Scott. Thanks for asking about the cats. We're going to have Scott Hilton on at some point as well, so we're going to set a date for that also to talk to Scott. Before I let you go, there were what I do with everyone is I ask them, especially a candidate, I ask the candidate to do their pitch. A 2 or 3 minute pitch, why you should vote for me, what they need to know, and where they can find that more information.
Sure.
So,
absolutely. Well, thank you, Rico, for having me on. Part of the challenge of being a candidate is simply introducing myself to would-be voters. That's the biggest uphill climb. I'm hoping once people get to know me, they'll understand, no matter what political party they come from, that we have a whole lot in common. In fact, I am a Democrat married to a Republican.
That's right. You told me that. So
Yeah.
so was I at one point.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And, people ask us all the time if we just argue about politics all the time. And we,
Does that happen?
we don't, no. We probably agree on 99% of everything, and for that 1%, we probably still agree on the goal, maybe just disagree on how to get there. I'm afraid that with Georgia having been what is essentially a one-party rule state for so long, that it's not really a choice between left and right. It's a choice between center and far right. I'd like to represent myself as somebody from the center. I would love to get votes from Democrats, from independents, from Republicans who, like my husband, don't recognize their party anymore. So I would like to be able to meet all of those people. I'm from here.
Right.
This is my home turf. I have the legal acumen to take on a job as a lawmaker. I enjoy going out and meeting people, and I really look forward to getting out there and canvassing and knocking on doors and meeting more people and hopefully winning their votes. So, and the reason I'm doing this, Rico, is because I do believe that Georgia deserves better and Georgia deserves more. So vote for Beth Moore on November 6th.
I like the way you worked that one in. So more and more of this, right? Is there an event coming up that you want to mention?
Yeah, absolutely. So you can check my event calendar and learn more about me and my platform at moreforgeorgia.com. That's all spelled out, MOORE, forgeorgia.com. We are hosting candidate meet and greets. In fact, we have one coming up not too far from where we are right now, Rico, over here off of West Jones Bridge. So we're going to be knocking on doors all over the precinct, starting right here in Peachtree Corners.
Great. Did you want to mention one or two other candidates that you're familiar with that you've come across?
Yes. So there are a lot of candidates running, particularly for races that in the past have gone unopposed. So I would love for folks in Peachtree Corners, for those who are in Senate District 40, to get to know my friend and fellow Democratic candidate for the state Senate, Sally Harrell, who's running against Republican incumbent Fran Miller. Sally is a wonderful candidate. She served as a state representative for 3 terms, and now she's back to run for the Senate. We also have a great candidate running to be our county commissioner, which includes all of Peachtree Corners and even a little further up north to Berkeley Lake. His name is Ben Koo. His website is Koo for You. And Ben is a wonderful candidate. He's a tech guy, Georgia Tech grad, and we would be very lucky to have him on the Gwinnett County Commission.
Cool. Great. If you have any questions for Beth, feel free to leave comments on this Facebook Live if you're watching it that way. Tell your friends about it. Share it. Go to Beth's website if you want to find out a little bit more about her campaign and where she will be over the next few months, because the election is November. So it's a long stretch getting there. And we'll be having, like I said, Scott Hilton on as well. And there's other candidates running that'll be coming up in November. So we'll be asking them to come in as well to talk to us. But Beth, this was a great conversation. Appreciate you coming out.
Thank you, Rico.
Thank you for doing it.
And thank you to all the viewers who watched. I appreciate it.
Yeah, and thanks for your patience too, because this audio is going on the podcast as well. So sorry for the initial troublesome stuff that was happening at the outset of this. And thank you for your patience on that.